session about shared living FY23 pending changes. I am super excited that everybody is here because I am excited to share with you the simplicity of the new shared living design. Of course, this is all pending. We are still on hold for CMS assurance of our new rate structure, but we didn't want to wait until after approval to introduce you to the changes because once we have approval, that starts immediately. So we wanted to give you an idea of how those look, how it's going to look, what you can look for, and just what to expect in the coming months as we're waiting. So we'll go ahead and get started. So do have a little bit of agenda, just it helps me keep track of the subject matter and structure my thoughts. And so we're going to talk a little bit at first about urban versus rural and how we are handling that. We're going to look at the pending rate structure and how that operates in tiers, how RAS designs that, what the daily rates are. We're going to demo the new rate determination form that you'll be using to decide what rate to authorize. And then we're going to talk about, once we get approval, what does that look like? How are we going to implement that? And some future enhancement planning for shared living. So urban versus rural, our goal was to eliminate the differential between urban versus rural, and we were successful at doing that in the waiver rate methodology. So once we have CMS approval, there will no longer be an urban versus rural distinction for waiver authorizations. Now, there still is going to be an urban versus rural distinction for room and board methodology, but only until we can get the work group together and determine what those room and boards should be. We can't just simply pick a number to change to. We need to have evidence of what's actually necessary, and we need to think that through. So that's something we're going to be doing. If we can have a decision made before CMS gives us approval for the waiver rates, we'll be able to implement that at the same time. So stay tuned. We may be able to simplify the room and board again. However, when I show you the rate determination form, you're going to realize that it's super easy anyway, and you're only going to have to know two things about the person to fill out the form, and the form is going to do the rest of the work for you. So our pending rate structure is going to be a daily rate, and it's going to be 3 tiers. Each tier is associated with one or more rate allocation scores. So it's going to be more similar to how we operate currently under ISL and group home. A core daily rate based on RAS. The daily rate is all encompassing. It includes the host and companion costs, your professional manager costs, administration, and relief hours. So it is one daily rate, just like ISL services are a daily rate. The RN will still be authorized separate from in its own separate authorization like it is now. This is just the component for the host or companion. The great thing about this is since it is a daily rate that encompasses everything, providers will no longer have to do variance reporting once this implements. So that means they'll be able to close out the last fiscal year and or fiscal year 22. And then once we have CMS approval, they won't have to track and report variance. It is just a figure and allotment of that daily rate for the host and the administrating agency to determine what's really needed and how to use that funding. So there won't be a minimum, a maximum. This is what you have to meet the needs of the individual, and you all figure out what that looks like. The other really good thing about this new structure is we're going to be able to implement a default process for the RAS like we do for initial placement into ISL services. So that's really great because I know it's been a struggle in the past when we've had to, someone is interested in shared living, they do not have a rate allocation score, and you guys are beating the bushes trying to go through the process of getting that before a budget can be designed. That won't have to happen anymore. Once we have approval, it will operate like the ISL or group home, that the person comes in as a default RAS1, and then the request is made, notified to the assessment team that you have a new person to placement, and roughly 3 months later, rate allocation score will be administered through the MOS, and then we'll go back to date of implementation and change the budget if necessary. So super nice. We're getting everything, all of our residential rate structures are coming into line and are going to be consistent in practice and implementation. So these are, this is a breakdown of the new daily rates. So you can see in your, in the table here that we have the tier and the RAS by tier, and then subsequently what daily rate. So a tier 1 is going to equal an RAS 1, a tier 2 is going to equal a 2 or 3, a tier 3 is going to equal a 4 or 5. And there's the daily rate that will be paid. I did not put the procedure codes there intentionally. We're hoping that in the near future, a year from now, when Connection is live, we're trying to design that so Connection will code these tiers or these RASs, where you just have to select the code in the RAS and the authorization creates itself like you would for group home. So we're hoping to eventually not need a rate determination form is what I'm saying. But right now we do, which is still simpler than what we're having in the future. Determining the rates. Lots of simplification here. Providers are no longer going to submit budgets once CMS approves this. The support coordinator will use a rate determination form, and that form is going to tell them exactly what to authorize by entering 2 pieces of information. So, so that's going to be really simple. So it's going to simplify and expedite authorizations by not having to process budgets from provider to support coordinator to their supervisor, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to make it very simple. And we try to formulate our rate determination form to do all of the work for the support coordinator. So there's shouldn't be any stressing about how it works. So we're super excited about that. So a couple of things, like all of our other rates currently, we are under an enhanced FMAP maintenance of effort. Therefore, no rates will be reduced. So when we're using the rate determination form, we have to look at the person's current daily rate in Seymour. And if what is in Seymour is higher than the rate determined by the rate determination form, the current daily rate in Seymour remains in place, and that's what you authorize. Okay. This also means because we have a standard rate determination form and it's either the higher existing now or the rate determination form, there will be no individual waiver budget adjustments. So it is what it is. And, you know, it's either that daily rate or it's this rate determination form, and that is the totality of the authorization. Someone asked, just to pop in a question, it's a good point in time for a question. Someone asked if the TCM in the past has us complete the budgets, we won't do that any longer. Correct. So right now, the shared living budget that exists is completed by the provider and signed by the provider. Once CMS approves our new rate structure, there is no budget for the provider to sign. It is simply determining what rate needs authorized. And since that's based on the rate allocation score, the provider doesn't need to generate anything. The support coordinator will just pull up this little form, enter 2 pieces of information, and they'll know exactly what they need to do. Okay. So this is just a brief, gives you a preview of what that rate determination form looks like. And then I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to share it with you. But this is the basic format of what it looks like. And the only thing that the support coordinator needs to know, and I guess I was wrong, there's three things they need to know. They need to know, is this person receiving host or companion services? They need to know what the person's rate allocations for, and they need to know whether it's urban versus rural. right, for the room and board. So three pieces of information. I've been saying two. So I'm going to pull up the rate determination form, and I'm going to show you just how easy it's going to be. Okay. So we're getting ready to do an ISP. We're going to pull up this form, and we're going to go, this person is host. Is it urban or is it rural? Or is it companion, urban and rural? So for the sake of this example, we're going to say host urban. Notice it populated a room and board amount. So it's pre-populated. That's all they got to do. Then they go, what's the person's rate allocation score? And we're going to say the person is an RAS 3. And it's going to populate what that monthly rate should be authorized as. So we put some little notes down here. Other would be something, I mean, you don't have to fill it in because no one's going to turn in this form. The support query might want to keep it with the person's ISP so they remember why or how they authorized that, but no one's turning it in for someone else's signature. But why would we use other? We would use other if the current monthly rate reflected in Seymour is higher than this rate. Okay. A reminder that the minimum of 60 units per year must be authorized to the RN code and the code to use. And that host and companion transportation is included in the rate and not authorized in addition to the shared living code. If you click on this host or companion, you're like, Wanda, I can't remember what urban versus rural is. If you click on the heading, I've got it written in there. So urban are just these counties indicated here. So you don't have to go and refer to a manual. You don't have to go somewhere else to look. It's all in here. The note for RAS, most recent CIS or MOS, whichever is higher. So just little tidbits, hidden notes there. If you remember those are there, there'll be no second guessing. Form tells you. So I'm going to click on those boxes and delete them, and I can pick something else. And let's pick that it's a rural and that they're a 5. Rural room and board pops up, and so does the waiver authorization. Notice that the waiver codes are in here, so it clarifies and people don't get confused about which one has the modifier, which one doesn't. So hopefully this will provide a lot of clarity for people. And help them really get that a little more succinctly and quickly. And then even though shared living is authorized as a monthly rate, it's based on a daily. So we broke this down here. And someone asked who will be completing the rate determination, provider or support coordinator. It's the support coordinator. There's no budget. There's no budget anymore. It's just like when you do group home, a support coordinator goes into Seymour and they select the group home code T2016U3, right? So the support coordinator is deciding what code to use. The provider's not giving them a budget. So this is the same concept. They fill out 2 pieces of information. It tells them what code and what amount to authorize. So someone asked if we could demonstrate other, again, if you go into Seymour and that person is, their room and board is above, you could simply just type in the number to remind yourself what you're supposed to be entering. Same with other, if their current Seymour authorization for host is more than this, you just go in here and it's for you. This is for your note, the support coordinator's note, so they know, oh, their current authorization is more. And you know, I could change that other to current authorization. It's other under room and board because it's current authorization, and some of them may be itemized, so that's why the other is there. So let me see. So someone asked a question about provider awareness of new rates, and going to cover that here in a little bit. Someone asked, how is this going to cover the rent for homes when the landlords for our homes are all different? So shared living has standard room and board rates. Host home, the person lives with their host. It is the host's home. So it's the host's responsibility to manage those funds and pay that rent and that room and board and all of those kinds of things that are necessary. So it's not intended to be it's not intended to be an itemized line item for room and board. It's intended to be a flat rate for room and board. So that's what we'll be taking back to the work group, is what does that room and board rate need to be? So we'll probably be asking some people for some analysis of what they're currently paying, so we can show what those rates need to be. Because we don't believe there needs to be a difference between urban versus rural, but maybe there does, depending on what the data actually shows us. Someone asked, what procedure do we follow for a child-specific contract individual? This budget does not dictate what Children's Division follows. We didn't design this budget for Children's Division. We designed the budget for waiver service recipients. So understanding that child-specific contracts do not have rate allocation scores, that's really for you to work through with Children's Division, and they may need to come up with their own format or interpretation of what this means. Okay. When a person living in shared living host home or group home settings has needs that cannot be met within the current rate structure, will they be required to move and receive ISL services? Shared living is what it is. This is the construct of the daily rate. So if the person can't be supported within the daily rate identified for shared living, then they need to examine other services. What that is, what combination that is, could be a wide variety of things. But that, yes, if shared living doesn't work for them, if the budget construct doesn't work for them, they do need to evaluate other methods. Interdivisional agreements will follow the same budgetary process. Eventually the MOS is supposed to, because an interdivisional agreement is someone who receives waiver. That's how they get an interdivisional agreement. So they do follow the same methodology. The MOS is intended to eventually reach all service recipients regardless of age. So eventually we will be able to assess those children for a rate allocation score. And what we've been doing currently is they've been a default 1 if they didn't have a rate allocation score. In the old format, we use the Vineland. The new format doesn't have, actually the existing format we're using now doesn't use a Vineland either. So yes, we will disseminate a copy of the rate determination form. We'll actually post it online. So you can access it anytime you need to, just like the ISL budget and staffing pattern. Someone asked, what about getting mileage approved for the relief staff? The shared living budget encompasses transportation. That daily rate encompasses the transportation for the host, the relief staff. That's what they have to work with. So that is between the administrating agent and the host or relief staff, whichever way. Will the daily rate be what is paid to host home provider or split with the placement contract provider? So that again is a discussion between the administrating agent and their host home. This includes administrative costs. This daily rate includes administrative costs and professional manager. So most assuredly, if the administrating agency passes every single dollar onto the host home, they're not going to be able to afford to pay their professional manager. So assumedly some of this would remain with the administrating agents, but how much is up to the contractor and their host. How will rates be reflective of people going or not going to day program? Those are already kind of figured into the tiers 1, 2, and 3. There was a determined number of hours of support for each of those levels. So this is the daily rate depending on their RAS, and they can still go to day program if that's appropriate for them. Will community specialist, RN, and mileage be separate requests? Community specialists and RN are separate. Mileage for the host home, companion, relief are built into this daily rate. Our urban hosts receive a room and board sum negotiated by the team, client, and guardian. Will this system enable those with currently higher room and board sums to continue to receive those sums? Yes. So if their current monthly rate for room and board or the shared living code is higher than this form generates, they can continue to receive that. And that's something we're trying to address with our work group reconvening to look at what those should be, because there's a number of issues with individualizing room and board and having fluctuating rates. So we want to kind of get together and come up with a plan to address those. Okay, so I'm going to, you guys are peppering me with good questions. Glad I did my homework. Okay, so let me pop back up my, and when we get through this, we can come back and look at any of these slides if we have time. All right. So because this is slide 8 of 11. So process for 7/122 rates. Once we have CMS approval, we will go back to 7/122 and we will rebuild them. So how do you're probably thinking, how do we know what that looks like? And we already have a spreadsheet that shows everyone living in receiving shared living services and what their RAS is and whether the amount that would be generated by the rate determination form is higher than the current amount or not. And so that will be uploaded to Seymour. And again, I know I've said it before a couple of times, but it stands just to reiterate that if the current daily rate is higher, they get to keep the current daily rate. And 2 instances where it could change and go up would be the person gets a new rate allocation score that increases the budget because it's going to follow the same processes as ISL and group home, right? So if they get a new RAS and it increases that rate determination form, then their authorization get increased. When we're at the end of the maintenance of effort for the enhanced FMAP, then the rates may be adjusted in accordance with standardization. So after that information gets into Seymour, PR will send a list to each provider of who their people are and what the rates are so the provider can verify, because sometimes our reports won't pull in if, say, a person doesn't have an active authorization, it won't pull in that person. So there might be people missing. So we will send a list out and we'll work with the business office and the provider to get anyone who was missed or anyone who could be an error, didn't translate correctly from the report to Seymour to get those fixed. Future enhancement planning. So we are, just to give you a little preview, we are working on a modifier for the shared living RN oversight, and we plan to match that rate with ISL and group home oversight. So that's something that's in progress that we're looking into. Until then, it remains under PAMS, which is going to increase to $20.29 per 15-minute unit when CMS approves. So just give me a little tidbit because I know there's a lot of confusion over why aren't they the same? Why aren't they the same rate? It's something that we're working on. I mentioned earlier that in connection, we hope to have billing codes specific for each RAS. So you just go in and pick host RAS1 and it generates it. And at that point, we won't need a rate determination form. So that's going to be super cool. And this is not new. I just wanted to remind, because this has come up in a couple of conversations here recently, that if a shared living provider wants to do out-of-home respite in a vacant host home or relief home, they do first need to get certified for out-of-home respite prior to actually billing it. There's been some confusion around that, but out-of-home respite is now a certified service. So they have to get that certification before they can start doing respite to non-residential individuals in their vacant hosts or relief. And to clarify, vacant means that host cannot have any authorizations for host home services in order to provide respite in their home. There's just been a little bit of confusion around that, so I just wanted to provide a reminder. I did have one more question pop up. Said, how are relief hours determined? Is it up to the provider and included in the rate? Yes, it is included in the rate, and it is up to the provider and their host home to work through what are the necessary supports that that person needs. And again, because it's included in that rate, the variance process will no longer be applicable. Just a few other reminders that this is the first of 3. We've plotted these at different points in the month and at different times to try to get maximum participation because we have so many people utilizing shared living services. We want everyone to be able to fit it into their schedule. So the next training is August 19th at 9 a.m. And then we have an August 24th at 10 a.m. And we do have a provider meeting on August 18th, and I will do a really brief overview, but will not be doing the full training, just some highlights. Someone else submitted a question. How will that go along with Department of Labor and the overtime threshold? The daily rate that we are providing is the new current contracted rate. It is up to the provider to design a service that fits within the contracted rate that we're willing to fund. So we will no longer be individually evaluating shared living budgets. It is either the rate determination form or the current daily rate, whichever is higher. Someone asked if I could do a rate allocation of 2. So assuming that's for a host, it would look like that. And I think I answered the question. Hopefully I answered the question. Someone asked again about relief hours determined, and I think I've responded that a couple of times. So anyway, so that is what I have to share with you. I know that was a quick rundown, but really that rate determination form simplifies so many things. So we're super excited. You guys had lots of excellent questions, and I thank you for that. Based on that, and anticipating that perhaps I will get just as many, I might expand the time for the next 2 by another 15 minutes, just in case there wasn't enough time. However, if you still have questions and you don't have the availability to email them right now, you can send those to me at wanda.crocker@dmh.mo.gov, and I will get them added to the Q&A. And one last question: if prior budget higher, how do we submit? You do not have to. You do not have to submit. The support coordinator will simply authorize what's in Seymour, either the higher or the rate determination form. So, and if you go back through the PowerPoint, there will, and it said, what makes up each tier? Not sure what that means by what makes up, but the RAS associated with each tier is indicated here. Okay. And we are hoping, we're praying that we have CMS approval by the end of September, but CMS is dealing with a lot of amendments right now. All the states with enhanced FMAP are requesting amendments to their waivers, and so they are very stacked. And so we're praying, we're working, our information is all submitted, and we're just waiting to be able to work through them. All right. And Lauren, I saw your question and I'll answer that in the Q&A, okay? So I don't have to leave everyone on. But thank you so much for all of your questions. Thank you for listening, and your questions help us think about ways to do things or things that we've not made clear. So hopefully everyone will like this much simpler process with shared living than our current budget structure. So we'll continue to look for enhancements, and all ideas are welcome. So thank you so much for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.